السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وله ثم ما بعد. We will continue our class in the explanation of the book العقيدة الواسطية by Shaykh al-Islam Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah al-Harrani rahimahullah ta'ala. And we're still in the discussion where the author rahimahullah, he said in the beginning of the book, he said وَمِنَ الْإِيمَانِ بِاللَّهِ, and from belief in Allah, الإيمان بما وصف به نفسه في كتابه, to believe in that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described himself with in his book, وبما وصفه به رسوله محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم, and in that which his messenger Muhammad صلى الله عليه وسلم described him with, من غير تحريف ولا تعطيل, without altering nor negating, ومن غير تكييف ولا تمثيل, and without setting a likeness, or without speaking about how the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nor without setting any likeness. And we reach where the author rahimahullah, he said من غير تكييف, without speaking about the how. من غير تكييف. قال الشيخ ابن عثيمين rahimahullah, he said التكييف, the word تكييف, speaking about how, the word itself did not come in the Quran or the Sunnah, but there is an evidence of it. There is an evidence regarding the negation or preventing speaking about how the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are. So at-takif, like we said, is to speak about how the attributes are, and it comes from the Arabic word كيف يكيف تكيفا إذا ذكر كيفية الصفة. It is by way of mentioning how the attribute is. And for example, you say, how did Zayd, how did so and so come? And the answer would be driving, or he flew. This is regarding speaking about the how. And likewise, what is a part of how does the car look? What does it look like? Description, details regarding the attributes of things. So you say, for example, it is a white car. So Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen, he said the people of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, they do not speak about the howness, or they do not speak about how the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are. And they use as an evidence for that, to not do so, evidences from the text, as well as evidences that are from clear pondering and intellect and understanding of the text. So he rahimahullah, he said, as for the clear evidence from the text, he said the likes of the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, قل إنما حرم ربي الفواحش ما ظهر منها وما بطن والإثم والبغي بغير الحق وأن تشركوا بالله ما لم ينزل به سلطانا وأن تقولوا على الله ما لا تعلمون. So the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that means, say, indeed my Lord has prohibited the shameful acts of sin, to the end of the ayah. And then in the end of the ayah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وأن تقولوا على الله ما لا تعلمون, and that you speak about Allah without knowledge, that which you have no knowledge of. So speaking regarding on behalf of Allah and regarding Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without knowledge is from the prohibited matters that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in this ayah. So if a man comes and he says Allah rose on the throne, how did he rise on the throne? Describe how did he rise on the throne. We say this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if one comes to speak about that, we say this is speech regarding Allah without knowledge. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that he rose on the throne, but did he tell us how did he rise on the throne? No. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala merely told us that he rose on the throne subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he did not inform us how. So we say speaking about how is the attribute, this is takif. This is speaking about describing the how the attribute is, and attributing a specific state of being without an evidence. And this is speech about Allah on behalf of Allah without knowledge. For this reason, some of the Salaf, they used to say, if the Jahmi, the one who negates the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if he says to you, Allah comes down to the heavens, how does he come down to the nearest heavens? How does he come down? Then reply with saying, Allah informed us that he comes down to the nearest heaven, and he did not inform us how he comes down. And this is a principle that is very beneficial. Another evidence that Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah mentioned is the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلَا تَقْفُ مَا لَيْسَ لَكَ بِهِ عِلْمٍ إِنَّ السَّمْعَ وَالْبَصَرَ وَالْفُؤَادَ كُلُّ أُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ عَنْهُ مَسْئُولًا. And do not utter that which you have no knowledge of. Indeed, the hearing and the sight and the heart, all of that one will be questioned about. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibited us and forbade us from speaking without knowledge. Shaykh rahimahullah said, as for the evidence and the proof by way of thinking and pondering and understanding, he said, for anything to be known, how the attributes of something or to the description or the state of being of something to be known, it cannot be known except by one of three things. And pay attention to this. Either that one sees something to be able to describe it, to describe how its attributes are, for example, or one had seen something just like it. One had seen something just like it. Or information that one receives from by way of a truthful person. طيب? So he said, either you saw something. If you see something, then you know it. You know its descriptions. You know how its attributes are, and so on and so forth. Or you see something that you saw something that is just like it. For example, and this is in regards to the worldly matters. وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى, and Allah is the best. To Allah is the best of examples. An example of that is one says he has, for example, he has a white 2023 Chevy Equinox that with this specific trim and so on. So he specifies the specific car. And if you've seen a copy of that same car, then you know what it's going to look like. طيب. Another, he said, for this reason, some of the people of knowledge, they say that when we say without a likeness, of course this does not mean, and we affirm to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala His attributes without a likeness. This does not mean that we do not, without a howness, without describing the state of being. This does not mean that the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that there is no specific how to the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, there is. But it's just that we don't know. When we negate is our knowledge of how the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rose on the throne. And there is no doubt that by way of us knowing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rose on the throne, then there is a specific way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rose on the throne. But we don't know what this way is. We don't know the description of how did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rise on the throne. Likewise, coming down to the nearest heaven. We don't know how He subhanahu wa ta'ala comes down to the nearest heaven. Because there is no existence. Nothing exists without a specific way. And nothing happens without a specific way. But it's either we know how this thing is, or we don't know. And in the case of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then we don't know. Because none of the three things that he mentioned, by way of them, that one knows the description of something, none of them comes true in regards to the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We did not see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nor did we see, وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ, and of course not anything that is like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, nor were we informed about how are the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran or in an authentic hadith, meaning that how did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rise on the throne? How does Allah come down to the nearest heaven? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not inform us how, and therefore it is unknown to us. And Imam Malik rahimahullah was asked, Ar-Rahmanu ala al-Arsh istawa, the most merciful rose on the throne. How did he rise? And then Imam Malik rahimahullah, he lowered his head and he started sweating out of fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and out of exalting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he rose his head, he raised his head and he said, Al-istiwa'u ghayru majhul. Rising and settling on the throne, the meaning of rising is not unknown. Meaning that we know the meaning of rising. And this again is a refutation to the statement of Al-Mufawwidah, those who say we don't know the meanings of the words of the attributes. Yes, we do know the meanings. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala spoke to us, and Allah subhanahu wa informed us of his attributes, and we know the meanings of the words, but we don't know how are they. طيب. So he said, الاستواء غير مجهول. Rising is not unknown from the perspective of the meaning, because the Arabic language is with us, and we know the meaning of the word istawa and istiwa. And he said, الاستواء غير مجهول والكيف غير معقول. And how is unknown to us, because our own intellects, we cannot comprehend the meaning of how, or the how. How did Allah rise on the throne? This is not something that we can find out by using our intellects, and we don't have a clear text in regards to this matter. We don't have any text, any verses from the Quran or a hadith from the Messenger ﷺ that describe how did Allah rise on the throne. And therefore one is not allowed to speak regarding the howness. How did he rise on the throne? He said, وَالْإِيمَانُ بِهِ وَاجِب. Believing in it is an obligation, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us so. And we believe in what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us. And we must believe in that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about himself. And therefore, it is an obligation to believe in it. He said, and asking about it is an innovation. Asking about how. Asking about how did Allah rise on the throne? This is an innovation. He said, Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, he said, because those who were before us, and those who were better than us, meaning the companions of the Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they did not ask the question of how. And therefore we are not allowed to ask. They were more diligent in knowing and in learning and understanding, and yet they did not ask how. In this statement of Imam Malik, rising is known, how is unknown, believing in it is an obligation, and asking about it is an innovation. This statement, you can use it as a principle regarding any of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Coming down to the nearest heaven, the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and so on and so forth. All of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he affirmed to himself in the Quran, or that his Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam affirmed to him in the authentic hadith, you can apply the same principle. Here, Al-Imam Malik rahimahullah, upon answering with this answer, he noticed that this person is a person of innovation, and he wanted to cause doubts, and he wanted to ask about things that are improper to ask about. So Imam Malik rahimahullah, he said, I see that you are an innovator, and he commanded that he is removed and that he is kept away from his circle. And likewise, Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah, he said that if one comes and asks you with this question or a similar question, then answer with a similar answer. However, tell him, we know that you do not intend, and this is from the hikmah, from the wisdom of Shaykh ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah. He said something in the meaning of, or in lines of, we know that you do not intend to ask about an innovative matter. However, this question is an innovation, so therefore do not ask it again. And if we see that he persists and continues to ask similar questions, then we can say this is an innovation, and therefore the person would be an innovator. And we should understand, like I said before, barakallahu feekum, that the Salaf rahimahumullah, they understood the meanings of the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the meanings, not how the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are, but the meanings of the words of the attributes that in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described himself, that it is known to them and they understood it. An example of that is their statement that we find that they say, أَمِرُّوهَا كَمَا جَاءَتْ بِلَا كَيْفٍ. Pass it on the way it came without speaking about how. And that means they understood it. Pass it on, meaning affirm it. It means affirm it. Affirm it. Say it. Describe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with that which he described himself with. Affirm it to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without speaking about how. Without getting into the how. So they knew the meanings, not like the Al-Mufawwida say that we don't know the meanings. Allah said Ar-Rahman, that he is merciful, but we don't know what mercy means. And Allah said that he speaks, and we don't know what speech means. And Allah said that he rose on the throne, but we don't know what rising means. And so on and so forth. They say that those are words that are unknown. That they are words which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala described himself with, but we don't know what they are and what they mean. This is the speech of the Mufawwidah. And this statement is false and is incorrect. The Salaf rahimahumullah, they affirmed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that which he affirmed to himself. But what they negated is their knowledge of how the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are, as we mentioned before. And then the author rahimahullah, he said, وَمِنْ غَيْرِ تَكِيفٍ وَلَا تَمْثِيلٍ, and without speaking about the state of being or how the attributes are, nor setting a likeness to creation. And inshallah, we will talk about this in the next class, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us to. And we will end here. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك.